Wonderful. Okay. Tenakoto katoa, tenakoto e aku rangatira. Toroa kina mate hare hare atura. Kia tatoa I tau ne kiora. Tenakoto, tenakoto, tena tato katoa. Kiora ko Stephen Croucher aho. What I have just done for all of us is welcome all of our participants near and far to this event, to this gathering. I've also acknowledged our deceased and those who are present, which is customary in Te Reo Maori culture, to acknowledge those who have passed and those who are here, and to welcome all those who are present. Let me welcome all of you to the 2021 Virtual World Communication Association Conference. I'm Stephen Croucher, the president of WCA, and I'm happy to be joining all of you from Wellington, New Zealand. It's a rather cloudy and really windy day. We have gale force winds today, so the wind's hitting about 70 miles an hour. For those of you in the US, about 100 or so K, some gusts. So we'll see. Outside my window, the trees are going nuts. But that's a normal day in Wellington, by the way, during this time of year. So, but I'm really happy to be joining you all. This is the first time that we've done a virtual conference. But a good friend of mine, not only this morning, but a couple of days ago, another colleague said, this is the year that everything has changed, 2021 and 2020. We've all learned how to pivot. It's one of our favorite words here at Massey University, pivot, how we can change. And we've all learned how to do that in different ways. And so WCA had to do that as well. And so we have to recognize the realities of COVID-19. While we had hoped in 2021 to actually be in Salt Lake, so I have to thank Clark and his team, we, unfortunately, I think with COVID, could not do that. We are looking forward to 2023, and shortly the board will be reaching out to a few folks to talk about 2023 locations and 2025 locations. Our goal is that as soon as possible, we can be back face-to-face in meetings with one another, shaking hands, having coffee, having lunch together, having kai, having food together with one another. Something I think many of us have missed. So just wanted to say that's basically why we're here. There was discussion of what do we do in 21? Can't be physical. Do we do the web conference? What do we do? And I thought we needed to do something just to really keep the spirit of WCA going. And I think many other conferences have had to deal with that kind of pivoting. So what I'd like to do in our opening session is, just so you know, I will not be giving the traditional presidential address during the opening session. I'd actually like to do that, a short address during the closing. The reason is I'd like to have time to reflect on the conference. So I'll be bouncing in and out of a lot of the sessions, trying to interact as best I can over Zoom with people, which will be interesting and fun, as it always is. But I'll be giving an opening address, not really opening, but an address at the end of the conference to really summarize really where we've been in the conference, where we've been as an association, where we are as a discipline, and so on. What I'd like to do is basically in this opening session is one of the first things we'll do is, besides me welcoming you to our Zoom land, is I will soon turn things over to our Secretary General, Cheng Zheng, who will go through some basic conference protocols, logistics, Zoom logistics, and just a few question and answer kind of things that people might have. And if anyone has any apprehensions or any worries about what about this or what about this, that would be a great time to ask me those questions. Or please feel free to send those in chat and we can try to answer some of those. So that's not a problem. But I'll turn things over to Cheng and then he will have that discussion. And then after that, I will then jump back in the driver's seat and have an introduction to our most esteemed and wonderful keynote speaker, who I'm just really excited to hear. So I've known her for over a decade, 15 years maybe. So someone I'm looking forward to hearing. So I will introduce our keynote, and then our keynote will give a keynote address. and then we will have a facilitated discussion. And part of that, when we get to that point, I'll talk a little bit about how we do the discussion when it comes to questions and answers and things like that. So I'll turn things over now to Cheng to talk a bit about the conference running, Zoom, other kinds of stuff. Kia ora.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Stephen. Welcome everyone. I have to say, this is my first time organizing a online conference. I bet this is the first time for a lot of you out there too. And just as an effort to have real-time conversations, we really put effort to make this a synchronous session, right? We didn't want people to just send us the recorded presentations. That way we don't have real-time interactions. That's not what we want at WCA. And as Stephen has already mentioned, that originally we're supposed to be in Chile, and that didn't work out. And our colleagues at Salt Lake City were kind enough to put in a bid, so we're working on that. And again, that point, in-person conference was really off the table. So now here we are. But I'm just overjoyed that we made it. Now I'm seeing everyone's face. We're talking. We're in this virtual space having real-time conversations. This makes me super happy. And in order to make this a successful experience for all of us, so I thought I would just go through some of the basic Zoom etiquette with everyone. So first one, to mute yourself when you're not talking, and don't type the wrong message in the chat box like Stephen just did a few minutes ago. So some of the basic stuff, and also, like Stephen has mentioned, these sessions are not automatically recorded. So I trust the chair and the co-chairs, we are starting the sessions, please hit the record button. And so that way the recordings will actually go to the Massey cloud. We'll be able to have those links. So we share the links with those who can't make the sessions real time, because again, remember that we have participants from all over the world, people coming from different time zones. So those will have a chance to view our sessions. And we're utilizing the Zoom webinar function. So everyone, especially if you have your email address, you should be registered as a panelist. So when you join the Zoom room, you should have, you should be able to share your screen without asking permission from your chair or co-chair. But if that is the case, you have difficulties, and the chairs, co-chairs should have the authority to promote you to a co-host. That way you'll be able to share your screen. And when in those sessions, typically there will be much smaller sessions, I assume. So if you can, please keep your camera on. I think this is what I've been telling my students over the last year, teaching them online for a whole year, to just camera is not on. You don't know if they're hearing you or they're understanding your questions and so forth. So we want to utilize the Zoom functions to make that happen. The same way that you have the reactions here, right? So you can give a clap, give a thumbs up, or there's also a function down there, Zoom, like raise hand and Q&A functions. Just utilize those to ask questions, to interact with each other, and just to make this opportunity count. And another thing I want to remind you, just usually over in the past, we always take some pictures for the receptions and so forth. And we'll put together a gallery after the conference. We'll put those online so everyone can look back and look at the wonderful experience we've had. So we want to do the same. Of course, it's going to be slightly different this year. So if you're attending a session, if there's a fun moment, please take a screenshot, or just to take a screenshot. Yeah, or exactly, use a phone or PC, just take a screenshot, send those to us. We'll be able to put together a gallery so for everyone to review after the conference. And I thought I mentioned the presentation award too, because yesterday we sent out emails to those who are eligible for a outstanding presentation award. There are a few criteria here. So you have to be, first of all, a non-native speaker, and you have to have to be either graduate or junior faculty. That means you've earned your PhD within 5 years, and you have to be also a registered member. So we, of course, it's hard for us to tell because sometimes a paper has multiple co-authors. So we weren't sure who will be presenting. So if you receive such email, want to be considered, please contact me as soon as possible. You still have some time to do so by the end of this particular session. You can send me a quick note via email right now. Just I want to be considered. And for those who, if we missed you in the email, please let me know too. So just tell me that you want to be considered. And also for the chairs, and we'll be relying on you too to evaluate some of the presentations. And chances are we'll be also sending in some senior faculty or board members to help evaluate these presentations. We'll be announcing the award winners at the closing ceremony. And I think that's pretty much what I want to share for the just the Zoom functions, the logistics. We do have a 3-day program, so when in doubt, do reach out. So I'm here. I think the Massey support team is also here. So just reach out to us if you have any questions. And do we have any questions for me? Alrighty. So I will also make myself available during most of the sessions. I will pop in sessions to view your presentations. I'll be seeing you more, and I hope we all have some intellectual growth. And more importantly, I hope we all have some fun. Okay, thank you. I've turned to Dr. Crutcher now.
Thank you, Cheng. I think he made up a few really good points. The key thing is, if you do have any questions, particularly as a chair, is I would recommend, one last thing is to try to log in if you can a few minutes beforehand, open it up. And if you have any questions, the email for Jason, he's in the room here. The email for Jason and John is there, and someone will respond really quickly to that if there's any questions. And I'll also be bouncing in and out of all the rooms, so I can also be there. So will Cheng. So there will always be help, so don't worry. It's really, we've tried to make it as simple as we can. So really, once you start it, it should go as easy as possible. But one of the things I met with our CFO, Barbara Monfils, and I met with Cheng yesterday. And one of the things I was saying is, every conference, you plan for it to be perfect. And there's always going to be something that happens, no matter how well it is planned. So there will be a little glitch here or there. The key thing is, we smile and we go on. Lauren Bacall once said, "I never minded the little things." It's one of my favorite quotations ever. And it's one of the things I actually try to live by. Never mind the little things. So, okay. So with that, what I would like to do is I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Tina Harris. So it feels weird for me to call her Professor Harris or Dr. Harris. I just call her Tina. So I'm just gonna say Tina is the Douglas L. Manship Senior Dory Maynard Race, Media, and Cultural Literary Endowed Chair in the Manship School of Mass Communication at Louisiana State University. And if you looked at her resume, you'd find that it's impeccable. For any junior researchers, senior researchers, advanced anyone, it's a career that we should all aspire to. But for me, that's not as important as two things. One is her research, which focuses so much on interracial communication, representations in media, and issues of social justice, is so important and so timely at this time in our world. So for me, that is also really critical, because she's doing work that I find personally, and I hope many of you all do as well, to be not only relevant, timely, but significant for us as a race, as a human race. And so I really appreciate that about Tina. The second thing is, I just have to say a couple of things on a personal level, is Tina's just also really cool. I'll just say that. I've known Tina now for about 15 years. And I'm not trying to date us, Tina. I'm really not. But a little brief story, because one of the things for those of you who don't know me, is a lot of the people that I try to make connections with people interpersonally. And Tina's one who I met probably about 15 years ago, I think at an NCA. We were in a panel, and after the panel, we were talking about, there's nothing on this subject. We really should talk about this. And then we started to get together and we edited a book. It happened right after an NCA session. And it was just like, wow, okay. It's like I have a new, a bestie at NCA, and I see her at ICA, and I see her other places. And we really started to spend more time getting to know one another. I learned a lot from her when it comes to issues of interracial communication, when it comes to representation of race in the media and in society. And it's also on a personal level. I mean, she's met my family. Whenever she sees my mom at a conference, the two of them just walk up to each other, big hugs, sit down and chat and gossip, I'm sure. But it's really nice to see that connection for me as well. And to see her now, she was at University of Georgia for years, to see her now be so successful at Louisiana State University just makes me really happy for her on a personal level. So I'm really proud to have her be our keynote speaker. So what she will do is I'm going to let her just do her thing. And then after that, we will then have a Q&A discussion with Tina. So I turn things over now to you, Tina.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for that wonderful introduction. Your check is in the mail. Hopefully the mail's not going to take too long to get there, but thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all so I can highlight many of the points that I want to make on today. I want to, again, thank Stephen for this wonderful opportunity to come and speak with you all on today. Too bad that we are not able to be together in person. I love to travel, and this would have been a wonderful opportunity to do that and to see my friend and others to really address some important issues when it comes to our scholarship, and in many instances, I'm sure they relate to our pedagogy. So the title of my talk today is Doing the Change You Want to See, Using Communication Scholarship to Transform the World. That title might seem a little bit ambitious, a little bit, I don't want to say haughty, but ambition for lack of a better word, but I personally see it as inspiring. I see it as a challenge to continue doing the work that I'm doing, and I'm sure that many of you all can relate to this as well. We know that 2020 and 2021 have been some very challenging years for us, and I will get into that in a little bit, but I don't know about you all, but with all the race issues that are going on here in the US, it's been exhausting. It's been draining, but I think it's important for us to continue this good work. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize my dear friend and co-author, Dr. Mark Orby. He's here. He's swinging through to support me, but I really do appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that he and I have collaborated on our textbook, which when we published the first edition back in 2001, which seems like it was forever ago, we knew that this was going to be an important work, and it continues to be an important area of scholarship. So I'm hoping, that by the end of this talk, if there are individuals who have not been fully persuaded, or there are those who are tired in doing the work that we do when it comes to race, I hope that this will give you some energy, give you some hope, and give you some encouragement. So just to give you a little bit of background on the areas of research that I focus on, I wanted to share these four, but I think I probably have more areas, and if I included all that on the slide, I probably would stress myself out. But the four primary areas are interracial communication, critical race pedagogy, race in media representations, and religious identity, communication, and race. So you can see that the common thread, or the common theme between those is race, and that is definitely a passion that I have. In case you did not know, I'm a Black woman. I identify as such, and that's one of the primary lenses through which I experience the world. And it is no coincidence, I don't think, that my work is informed by that aspect of my identity. So when it comes to thinking about interracial communication or just communication and race, I think that we need to like step back just a little bit and recognize that race is a critical factor in communication processes, because there are four main things I would like to highlight. And I apologize for that. That is my dog, Jack, who is barking at the wind. Who knows? I apologize. So race is a factor in that it shapes our identities. It has a, I'm so sorry. Let me close the door. I know that's not professional, but he's a puppy and I can't let him run the house. All right. So communication and race are really important because number one, race shapes our identities. It informs who we are. It defines who we are. It's a critical part of how many of us see ourselves. It informs our worldview. And it impacts our interactions with each other. I remember when I was in my graduate program at the University of Georgia, I was a master's student, and I saw there was a connection between my lived experiences, or there was a disconnect between my lived experiences and what I was observing in the classes that I was enrolled in. I saw so many theories. I read a lot of articles, just like many of us have, and I thought, oh well, this was and the scholarship was definitely engaging and interesting, but what I noticed was I didn't see me reflected in the research. And I would say, oh well, this is an interesting finding from the study or in this essay, but I just didn't see where I fit in. And I believe that that has been a driving force in the kind of research that I do. I'm not saying that my research is all about me, but I want to essentially center some experiences that are oftentimes marginalized. And so when I think about studying interracial communication, I mean, I have a passion for it. I love doing it. There's no way that I can get around it. I've never tried to take race out of the equation because I think it's very important. And if I did try, I'm sure that I would come right back to it. I did my dissertation, oh goodness, so many years ago, in 1995, 26 years ago, and it was on interracial dating. And after I finished that chapter, I said, that chapter of my life and my dissertation, and in terms of being a student, I think that we all could probably relate to this. By the time I was finished with my dissertation, I was at a point where I said, I don't really care who people date. I don't care about any of it at all. If you date, that's great. If you don't date, that's totally fine. Just give me my degree and let me move on to my next stop. But I do say that in jest. I haven't done as much research on that since my dissertation, but nevertheless, it really set a strong foundation for how I identify as a communication scholar. I see that there's a connection between race, communication, identity, and so many other things. So I focus personally on race because race is what I do, it's who I am. And when I say, race is what I do, I'm experiencing the world through a lens as a Black woman. And yes, my gender is important, as well as my education, my background, and other aspects of my identity. But I can't help but recognize that many of the experiences that I have are quite similar to other women who look like me. And there are people who maybe don't look like me, but they don't understand that these are realities that are, they're different from them, but they reflect some realities and worldviews and perspectives that are not represented in our scholarship. And even if we want to look at it from a layperson's perspective, we don't see that in the media. And so I look at everyday things through these multiple lenses. And I'm very fortunate and grateful that as a scholar, I can translate those experiences into scholarship. Something else that I think is really important in terms of studying interracial communication specifically is that race is an incredibly complex social phenomenon. And I won't even count how many publications I have produced, but I think every time that I either see a special call for a journal for a special issue, or I receive an invitation to contribute to a body of work, I jump on it because it gives me the opportunity to articulate my position on different issues and to really, develop them through a critical essay or an autoethnographic piece, or maybe even through conducting a qualitative study. But I see that the scholarship that I do is very, it's very empowering and liberating for me to take my scholarship to like the next level every opportunity that I have to contribute to whatever project I'm working on. And so when we think about what's going on here in the US, I think that I'm going to assume that many of you all might be able to relate to this, or you can at least recognize that we have a lot of issues that are going on. I don't know that they're necessarily unique to well, yeah, they're not unique to the US, but they are some profound issues that I think are really pushing us to, have some difficult conversations, to have these talks that are long overdue. And the first thing that I wanted to highlight when it comes to thinking about the US and our state of emergency when it comes to race is that there has been this myth of us living in a post-racial US. And I am sure that we can all agree that that myth was burst last May, shortly after the murder of George Floyd. Many of us have been saying this over and over again over the years of just being alive through our scholarship and through our lived experiences, that racism is alive and well. We've been telling the story for centuries, for decades, and it's almost as if people don't have not believed us, or maybe they think we're playing the race card. They may think that this is all a figment of our imagination, but the reality is that this is our reality, and it's not just people of color who have been historically marginalized who are impacted by race, but all of us are in one way or another. The election of President Barack Obama in both 2008 and 2012 kind of set the ball rolling when it comes to this idea of a post-racial US. So I think that many of us were excited that now we're finally being seen, we're finally being heard. But with the election of Trump, that was dispelled. It is as if, excuse me, we are regressing in time, and things have shifted considerably. I didn't plan on talking about this, but I do want to briefly mention that I believe it was at some point between the two terms that President Obama served, my mother and I would have, we had many conversations about race and the state of race relations. And something that she told me was that she said, white people are angry. White people are angry because we have this black man, as president of the United States. And I just thought, I was not being dismissive of my mother, but I thought internally, is it really that bad? Is there a connection between this perception of heightened racial tensions and resistance to Blackness and President Obama? And I just thought to myself, it couldn't be that bad. I'm not going to say that I was being idealistic, but given the times that she grew up in, we are doing far better than we as a country were then, or at least that's what I thought. But as things have unfolded, I've seen that, yes, it was almost as if she had a quote unquote prophetic word regarding the state of race relations in the US. And so we can see that with the election of Trump, this misconception of a post-racial US has dramatically shifted. So there was a misconception of a shift in societal attitudes towards racial differences and race relations, and that everyone is accepting of these differences. And we can see now that that is not the case. The public discourse revealed deep-seated hate for Obama, despite his social justice social justice efforts for all. That's not Al, but all. I apologize for the typo. And lastly, the racist tenor of the US became clearer in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump. And even in the election of President Biden, we've seen that this is just, things have really gotten out of control. And it might not be a surprise to many, but I think that it is a clarion call for us to step up and do the right thing. So when it comes to Trump's presidency, it marks several points that I think are really important for us to pay particular attention to. And that is number one, their support in the 2016 campaign. It was clearly driven by racism, sexism, and xenophobia. So that was his platform. And even though, those are systems of oppression that have been ingrained in our society, they've been woven in our fabric. And we would think that this is 2016, and surely people would see the problems with putting someone like that in power, but that is what happened. And so that was his platform. He spoke to many people, and they came and they supported him. Some of the research that has been done on societal attitudes towards race and the campaign, and the attitudes towards Trump and just society in general since his presidency, know that there is a clear correlation between his campaign events and incidences of prejudiced violence. But there's a correlation, but researchers cannot make a strong connection between the two. But I'm sure we all have heard the saying, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So something else that's really been disturbing, and I believe that there are many people who are seeing this for the first time, is that hate crime rates have more than doubled compared to similar counties that did not host a rally. So wherever he has been going, wherever he has been trying to recruit recruit supporters and other like-minded individuals, there's been a connection there. There's been a rise in hate crimes. And so his presidency has really mobilized many of us to step up and do the right thing. So I wanted to highlight some critical points that have occurred during the 2020 year that I believe are reflective of a racial pandemic. So we had the racial unrest began on May 26th, and that was in Minneapolis. And it's not showing on the screen for some reason, but that was started by the murder of George Floyd on May 25th by Derek Chauvin. People were very upset. This happened in Minneapolis, and they just said enough is enough. In May, so we learned about the murder of Breonna Taylor. She was in her home and was murdered. We learned about her after it was brought to our attention, about George Floyd being murdered. And there are other names that were tagged on to let people know that this is a serious issue. Police brutality, as it has impacted African Americans, has been going on for centuries. But lately, it's gotten worse because of racial tensions in general, and the racial pandemic just really brought everything to the forefront. On May 28th, the National Guard was deployed, and I don't think I'm alone when I say this, but for most of last year, I would watch the news, and I was just glued at seeing things unravel. And I believe that I'm not saying that the violence that occurred or any of the property damage, was a good thing, but it did bring to light that these are some serious issues that we have to deal with as a country and as scholars. Everybody probably does not want to do race. Everybody cannot. We have so many different issues that we can explore in our scholarship. But for those of us who are interested in, invested in, and have a passion for social justice and racial justice specifically, this was a clarion call. So May 28th, the National Guard was deployed. I watched all this unfold on television. I was in disbelief. I had so many emotions, throughout not just that initial stage of the racial pandemic, but it existed prior to that as a Black woman throughout my life dealing with issues, but these just kind of came to a head. From May to August of last year, there were peaceful and non-destructive protests, but then you had people who were infiltrating the protests throughout the country who were trying to make the Black Lives Matter movement and the Black Lives Matter organization look like a terrorist group, and they are not. And you'll notice on the side of each on each side of the slide I have, from 2013 to 2014, we have the global network Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter was born out of the anguish, hurt, pain, and just, I can't think of a better word to describe it, but there were serious concerns about the fact that Tamir Rice was murdered. And I believe he may have been 16 years old at the time, if that. He was a young man who was walking home from the store in Florida, and he lived in Florida, and George Zimmerman said that he was a suspicious looking Black man. He felt that he had done something wrong. He was pretty much being a vigilante. He brought to our attention, unfortunately, stand your ground as a policy, as a law. And it was very disturbing, that he felt as though this young boy were a threat to him. So in response to that, the Black Lives Matter organization was established. And then they have been at the forefront in addressing all these issues and educating people about issues that are impacting African Americans, especially when it comes to racial prejudice, racial justice, and the need for social justice. So in June, 200 states implemented curfews. And I know that we all can say that we recognize that there was also a health pandemic going on. So we had coronavirus was and still is impacting us in many ways. So we had these dual pandemics that we had to contend with. And for many people, it was doubly draining, doubly exhausting, because we're dealing with these two very unique and troubling issues at the same time. And it was just a lot, and continues to be a lot. On July 7th, there was the blackout, where people were, blacking out their social media in support of the social justice issues around Blackness and Black Lives Matter movement. September 8th and 9th, that was an opportunity for scholars to step in and to demonstrate their commitment to racial justice. And so, and they were doing so to bring attention to these issues. And I participated as well. I said, there's no way as a scholar who does research on race that I can't not participate. I think my students will be okay for this one day. And so I participated with many, many others. Much has happened since September, but two critical points that I think resonate with so many people are that, number one, on January 6th, there was the Capitol insurrection. And I can't tell you how many conversations I had with friends, family members, and colleagues who, as we watched that unfold, we thought, my goodness, you have these white men, white women, and others who are storming the Capitol. They were able to make their way inside the Capitol with guns, with all kinds of weapons, with the purpose was not to go and have peaceful conversations with anyone, to talk about any particular issues. They just created this riot. And I don't believe any people, and if there were individuals who were arrested at that time, they were very few in number. And what we thought to ourselves was if they had been Black, what would their response have been? And I think I looked at numbers at some point during this week, and I believe that maybe 400 people have been arrested, but we know that more than 400 people were there. And if we think about people who are at home, using their social media platforms to, identify with, with those individuals who instigated the Capitol insurrection, there are many of them. However, if we were to look at this from a different racial perspective, if any of those individuals, not only those who were participating physically in the Capitol insurrection, but those who have been mobilized in other ways, if they had been Black, or if they had been brown, or of color, of any other racial ethnic group, things would have turned out a lot differently. There probably would have been a massacre, on the Capitol stairs. And watching all this unfold has really pushed me to continue doing the work that I'm doing, because it's important. It may not deal directly with politics, but we're looking at the politics of race and so on. And the next milestone, I guess you could say, in this pandemic was on March 26th, when Derek Chauvin's trial was underway, and he was found guilty of murdering George Floyd. And I'm just going to deviate just a little bit, but I don't know if many of you watched the whole video, but I can't even tell you how much of the 9 minutes and 29 seconds I watched, but my heart broke when I saw it. I didn't see it live, but you know, when it was aired, I just thought, my goodness, what has happened to our humanity, where this man who is supposed to protect and serve goes into this community and puts his knee is a lethal weapon, and he lodged it on Mr. George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. He had every opportunity to lift his knee, to help this man, to handle the situation in a very different manner, but he chose not to. And I just can't, well, unfortunately, I can believe it happened, because it did happen. We saw it on, on the video. And there's a little bit of, hope in terms of racial justice, by seeing Derek Chauvin sentenced. He was found guilty. And this is just one case, and I believe that hopefully this will galvanize people and encourage people to continue to do the right thing in whatever capacity they see fit. So when we think about the future of communication research, I have a few questions that I want to pose to you. So you don't have to answer this. Maybe this is just food for thought, but just ask yourself, are you a part of the problem or the solution to reconciling the races? And I ask myself these questions all the time. So if I'm a part of the problem, then I need to figure out a way that I can be a part of the solution. Am I using my resources to advance these issues? How can you make a difference in, that should be how can you make a difference in your research, not my research. I think I have that that handled, but I have to ask myself, when all this happened last year, I just thought, my goodness, should I no longer do research on teaching race in the classroom? I mean, that's my passion. That's what I've been doing for quite some time. But my hope is to remain committed to that. And what can I do in this space to create opportunities for us to have these difficult conversations and dialogue? Does this mean that I'm going to teach any differently? Am I going to teach the same way? What can I do to give back to the discipline in ways that I think are going to be material change, that are going to result in material change? And what am I doing that truly matters in this world? So in the end, am I doing something to make these spaces that I occupy, am I doing it to make it better? Am I doing it so that other people can, see that it's okay to do the kind of research that I do, that your voice needs to be heard, and you should use these spaces as opportunities to articulate those ideas and experiences? And another question that I ask you is, where's your passion? What drives you? I tell people, all the time that when it comes to my research, I have so many things that I'm interested in that if someone were to, tell me that I can't do X work anymore, I would have a problem with that. If someone were to tell me that you can't focus on race, I'm like, oh my goodness, then what can I do? That's a part of who I am. And I guess I kind of feel the stereotype of, research is me search. Well, that's true in my case. It's not true for everybody, but this is where my passion is. And I will continue to do this work. Some people ask me, how do I maintain that passion? And I've been doing it for, a number of years. And I get excited. I went to lunch today and I was talking with people about some of my research. I was like, oh, wow, I'm so excited that I'm doing a critique of Bridgerton, the series on Netflix. So we have to find out what our passion is. Is it keeping you interested, but also, what are you doing to change and impact worldviews and perspectives? Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, and so this is here are a few tips that I have for you all. What do we do when it comes to the research? I believe that we could all, say that we want our theory, our work to essentially go from theory to practice. So we as scholars, sit around, we have these engaging conferences, and conversations about theory and concepts and things that we're doing to advance our scholarship. But how do we move it, out of our world into the real world? And so one thing that I think has been emerging over the last year, it's I'm sure been happening for quite some time, is Columbusing or bandwagoning scholarship on pedagogy, on diversity, on I've seen Columbusing and bandwagoning, where people who have not done research on race, all of a sudden they're interested in it, they're doing workshops and they're creating all these resources. These are important issues, but I personally would question, I wouldn't directly question someone, but it does, cause me pause, when I see that someone who hasn't done research on this area is now, jumping in. Are they genuine about it? Are they sincere? And so these are questions I think that we also should be considering, and then cautioning people not to just not do this research, or do this research just because it's a hot topic. It's the the hottest and greatest thing to do. As a discipline, I think that it's important for us to avoid tokenizing faculty and students of color. I remember when I was a graduate student many years ago, and this was the only time that I was asked by the then faculty to take a job candidate on a tour of campus. And they didn't even have to tell me explicitly why they were doing this, but I knew that whoever it was that was going to come and do this job talk is a Black person. And so she and I met, and once I saw her, we both were like, girl, okay, we connected in that regard, because we just knew, that we have not always been, I don't want to say used, but we have not been afforded opportunities to be a part of the process, of learning how academia functions. And then all of a sudden, for our resources to be tapped into, we know that there was something going on there that was very much like tokenizing. So we need to avoid tokenizing our faculty and students of color. We also need to avoid obligatory diversification of our curriculum. So, just sprinkling in a unit here and a unit there, about diversity. It needs to be woven into all of our curriculum, both, for undergraduate and graduate students. I believe that there is a thirst for a decent number of people in our disciplines who, in our respective programs, who are interested in these issues and topics. I teach at LSU. I taught at the University of Georgia for 21 years before I came here. And so I've been at a predominantly white institution, my entire life, including my own education. And I recognize that there are students who take these classes, and there are a decent number of them who don't want to take the class. But it's imperative that they do, because they're going to be going out into the real world and experiencing people who are not like them. And I want them to know that it is more than just ideological diversity, but there's racial, ethnic, and cultural diversity that needs to be accounted for when we think about our interpersonal interactions. And we also should, prioritize developing collaborative relationships with scholars of color, not just to be jumping on the bandwagon, but to, think about the people that you're working with. Sometimes not sometimes, when we are invited to participate in projects, there are unique world perspectives and worldviews that we can bring to the table that oftentimes are not even considered. And it doesn't mean that you have to go. I'm not encouraging going out and saying, hey, I know this one scholar who is Indian, and I'm going to ask them to be on this not panel, but to be on this grant proposal, because I think that it would look good for us to be diverse. No, you're looking at the entire person. They're not just a scholar, they're a human, and they have valuable contributions that they should make, or can make. When we think about our curriculum needs to be inclusive. So that means addressing systemic oppression, including research by scholars of color, And I have found, I think I've been doing this all along, but I'm even more mindful, of diversifying the scholarship that I'm, teaching, both not in my undergraduate courses, but my graduate courses as well. And I'm very excited when I can tell, the students that, oh, I know this person is pretty cool. And so they're like, oh, wow, she knows everybody. I don't know everybody, but I do know a lot of people. And so I think that it's imperative that we create these spaces where diverse voices can be heard. I think the institution should also require diversity courses for not only undergraduates, but graduate students. And this has been in the works for many years, but we also have to, take note of what kinds of diversity is being taught in these courses. Is it just 1 week and that's it? Is it just one unit, or is it woven through the curriculum? And I believe that there might be some pushback because people don't want, or faculty don't want others to tell them how to teach their course. But I think it's our not only our professional responsibility, but it's a moral obligation, I think, to introduce our students to different ways of thinking and being. And the last note is to offer a diversity certificate, namely for graduate students. And that might even be, an opportunity to think about offering that to our undergraduates as well. I have had the fortune of teaching a multi cultural course in mass media here at LSU since I have been here. It's been 2 years. I teach one class every semester for undergraduates, and I love it. It's similar to what I taught when I was at Georgia, but a little bit of a different focus. And students have, and these are all, students from different races and ethnicities, not just students of color, who are telling me that this was a powerful class for them to take. They are really excited about these opportunities to think in different ways. And I believe that our students are ready for more of these difficult conversations. We just need to be in a position to assist them and encourage them to engage in not just these conversations, but the curriculum that would prepare them to have those difficult conversations. So a couple of notes here and I'll wrap up, are that we need to allocate our resources for funding research addressing racial inequities. And I know the resources are kind of low for people, but I think that if there are creative ways that resources can be generated for a department or a school, then those ought to be pursued, and then offer individuals resources that can help them to do their own research, on race, ethnicity, and culture, because otherwise they might not be able to do that kind of research. And I will, admit that when I was at the University of Georgia, I never had the resources to do the kind of research that I wanted to do. I wound up early in my career using student reaction papers as my data. The students their grades weren't impacted by it at all, but I would go through IRB to get permission to use it. And the knowledge that was generated from that classroom exercise was great, because I was able to get a number of publications out of it, and that's fine. But what I learned from that, one among many other things, is that the classroom can be an excellent space, for us to really think critically about how we're teaching about diversity in the classroom. And so, I didn't have those resources, and ultimately at Georgia, we were using custom publishing as a way to not only produce resources within the department for our students in our introductory level courses, to purchase these resources at a better rate than some of the textbooks that were specific to those areas. And then the money that was garnered from that was used to fund research. So we had to apply, for them in moderation, within a year or two period. And so I was able to at least get funding for one project before I left. And so now I'm an endowed chair, and I have resources that I never could have imagined that I could use to do some important work. I know that my position is unique, but nevertheless, we all need those resources to do research that we think is going to be impactful. We should provide professional support for faculty who are conducting these scholarship exploring diversity issues. So, how can we affirm these individuals to let them know that their work is valuable, and important, and they are important. We also need to recognize and reward invisible labor. And I can't speak enough on that. I have many colleagues, across, the country and the world, who have engaged in invisible labor. And when we think about those of us who are from historically marginalized groups, we take on even more labor. And some of that is because there's a significant amount of, service that's expected of us as faculty in general, but then we're tapped on to, be in these spaces to make, hopefully, substantive contributions. But we are also sought out and even recommended, from there are recommendations made from graduate students and maybe even undergraduates to undergraduates saying, hey, I think you need to meet, this professor. They will, help you out. There's someone that can really relate to your experience, and I've had a good experience with them. And so we are engaging in invisible labor that we can't even quantify that, on our CV. So it needs to be recognized and rewarded. And lastly, we need to listen, and listen some more, and then listen some more. This is a time for some people to speak up, and this is a time for others to listen. And so I hope that all of us will, take that as food for thought to really engage in effective and meaningful communication with each other, so that we can, lead the world and the country and our spaces, and our respective institutions into a future where it's more inclusive and it's not just empty words, that we're committed to making a difference in meaningful ways. That's all I have. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So there's so many nuggets in there for me. What I guess I'd like to do is really go into discussion with folks. And so what I will do is, if people have questions, is first of all, if they could raise their hand on just at the bottom of your screen. If you're not familiar with Zoom, most of us are, but if you aren't, there's a little raise hand button. So I've just raised mine and I've just lowered it. So if you can just raise your hand, and we'll try to find you that way. And Cheng and I will try to find folks that way, just to go through questions. I'm happy to start off with the first one though. I'll just take President's prerogative, if no one minds. One of the things that I was really wondering, Tina, is you talk, it was really interesting to really hear those issues of, how can you make a difference in research? What am I doing that truly matters? What drives you? And are you part of the problem? Those, for me, really stuck as really important questions. Because I think any of us who work with students or, early career researchers generally ask people, do what you're passionate about. Do what you care about. If you don't love it, you're going to hate doing your doctoral thesis. You're really going to hate it. So find something you love. And so I guess linking with that is, if someone is doing research that in their mind, they don't think relates to race. And, we've all met folks who, probably think that.
Mm-hmm.
Is, how do you think that those questions could relate to them? How can they converse with those questions, particularly from a racial lens, I would say?
Well, I think that what happens is, I'm going to use the context of reviewing for journals, as an example, or when I am advising a graduate student or I'm on their committee. What I like to do is to challenge them to think about, like, whatever their topic is. It doesn't matter what it is. They know that if I'm going to be on their committee, and this doesn't happen, of course, when it's I'm just going to focus more so on, being on a graduate student committee, because I think that will help articulate this. I will push the student to consider why your population is not diverse. So if they're focusing on, well, I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but let's just say that they are focused on recruiting students who, well, I mean, most of us who are doing interpersonal work, we're going to do convenience sampling. We're going to depend on our students right there at our institution to participate in our studies. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you might have few resources. But if you're at a predominantly white institution, then offer a rationale, in your proposal or even in your final product regarding the fact that you chose a predominantly white institution. There's nothing wrong with being at one, but if you did not center race, then let us know why you did not center it. I want to push people so they can think a little bit more critically about this, because I think that I know that when I was a graduate student and I'm reading these articles and I'm like, oh well, this is interesting, but as a Black person, that's not how we would do that. And so I know that there are a lot of people that don't want to talk about these issues, but what they can do is to explicitly address that in your scholarship, because there are other worldviews, and we know that there are voices that are being excluded as well as experiences.
I really appreciate that. I think that's the idea of really, especially if you're looking at, say, an operationalization part of, say, a thesis, like from my social scientific brain going on for a second, is still having that discussion of, I've chosen this population to sample to, and I have this sample, but still, this is where the population is here in our country, but this is really how, having that conversation and recognizing that maybe your population is maybe too homogeneous, maybe it's very maybe it's too heterogeneous or something, but having that conversation at least. And yeah, but I mean, also not making that tokenism, like in the limitation section, which we see too often. This was a student sample, but not dismissing it, but actually really having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That is really important. I think I will just say, in New Zealand, we can't survey our students at our universities.
Oh wow.
So we're not allowed to, from an ethics point of view. So it makes research a lot harder on undergrads.
Oh yeah.
So I will go to Carolyn Callaway Thomas, and then we will go to Chad's question in the chat. But Carolyn first, our former president of WCA as well.
Okay. Thank you, Tina, for that presentation. I was keenly interested in your use of the word diversity and the use of the term inclusion. I want to know, how spacious is that word for you? Is it a word that focuses primarily on African-American students, African-American people, or is there space in your world for rural whites, or should they be excluded from this whole notion of diversity?
No. I believe, well, thank you for your question, and it's great to see you.
Nice to see you.
When I think about inclusion, I mean, that means to include everybody who is in this space together, because everyone wants to be connected. I mean, we're all gathered in the space, whatever that space may be, for a reason. And I personally don't want anyone to ever feel like they don't belong in that space. So even if it's a new class of undergraduates or graduate students, I want to make sure that every one of them feels comfortable here. They feel confident in their work, and they know that they have a support system here. And I might not know that they come from a from a low socioeconomic status, or they're from a rural part of the state. I'm still learning about Louisiana, but I never want anyone to feel disconnected, and I will go out of my way to make sure that I pull them in. So inclusivity means to include everyone, and I don't want people to be included with the assumption being that there's going to be exclusion. I'm not saying that if I point to somebody over here, I want you to come to the table. I'm not wanting someone else to get up and let you sit down. I want there to be a bigger table for us to all sit together.
I want to say that my question is motivated by the fact that a lot of the discourse that comes from progressives seems to suggest that there's a difficult other. The repugnant other is the, quote, the deplorable, who happens to be someone from rural settings as opposed to individuals from cities or towns. And so when I think of what we need to do in order to promote the common good, the good we share in common, it seems to me that we probably should be about the business of reaching those individuals who may seem to be problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And those individuals who may be, quote, angry, those individuals who may be thinking that their world is slipping away from them. And I think the psychology of some rural individuals is this notion that they see their world, quote, slipping away. Because as you know, once upon a time, if you graduated from high school in the United States of America and you were white American, you had a marvelous job. And so those metrics are changing. And so I struggle with this a great deal because it's a conversation that I hear again and again. Those people, they are the problem. And then I wonder to what extent are progressives and elites held to account? Because if we are so good and we're so kind, if we're doing what we want to do, what is the necessity for courses on diversity? I grapple with that.
Yeah. To me, it's very frustrating to try and offer a rationale for teaching these classes, and not that I could not come up with one, but the fact that some people don't want to hear that these classes are a necessity, that they think, oh, we're going to be changing people's minds and corrupting young adults and things like that. And it's certainly important for us to have these conversations. And I believe that it's something that is undergirding and probably even really pushing a lot of these difficult conversations or issues is this perception of, as you mentioned, the I can't remember your exact words, but like the scary other, this other that is supposed to be framed
Repugnant.
as a threat. Repugnant. Yeah, I mean, so I think that when if we were to look at the U.S. historically, Blacks and other communities of color have been framed as the other. There's something, we are something to be feared. This is a part of our, unfortunately, the fabric of this country. And then when Obama was elected, that narrative just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And you have other voices that are trying to talk over, I don't want to say talk over that, but people, were drinking the Kool-Aid and believing that, we are, the threat. I mean, I haven't dealt with and how to tease all that out on a scholarly level. I'm still trying to deal with it on a personal level because these are some really serious issues that we're talking about. And I think that fear is driving a lot of that, the fear of the other. But I think that if we continue to push ourselves to have these conversations, then we can produce scholarship and we can have dialogue, not just amongst ourselves, but in our communities to where we can bring about, increased understanding. And I try to do that in my classroom. And I was kind of shocked with having taught virtually all year. I was like, how in the world can I talk about diversity online with students? I'm not going to ever get a chance to see them. And how can it be productive? And I think for both classes, according to my course evaluations, they went really well. So thank God for that. But many of my students, have emailed me, and they even said in the evaluations that they appreciated the space they had to have these difficult conversations, and they were respectful with each other. But then, of course, you're going to have the one or two who are going to resist everything that you do all semester long. And one student in particular made a comment in an email to me, nickel and diming about participation. This person did not participate in the class, but thought they should get all the participation points. I'm like, well, if you're not, raising your hand or talking in the chat, that is not participation. In this talk and in class, I did say, it's important for us to talk, but also to listen. But if your participation grade is factoring into your overall grade, and that's not a listening exercise, you're supposed to talk. But that young lady had that issue, but she also made it clear to me that she was resistant to much of what was discussed all semester long, even though she did quite well, and told me that, what did she say? She said something to the effect of me creating a hostile classroom environment. And I was like, really? That's not what your peers are saying. None of them are saying that at all. And so that's kind of frustrating. She's a white woman. She identifies as a Christian. I identify as a Christian too. And I try to reach out to her at the beginning of the semester to kind of allay any kind of concerns or issues that she may have had. And so, I'm like, well, I can't, I'm not going to compromise my integrity as a person or as a university professor, but I'm going to push these conversations because we have to have them.
Thank you for that. We keep getting more and more in depth into this. And I think it's one of the cool things we see is that when I wrap up at the end, some of the things you said there resonate so well with what's happening here in New Zealand as well. What I'd like to do is, Chad, would you like to just say your question, or do you want me to just read it? If you want to say it, just go ahead. I think Chad too is next. He had a question.
Okay, yes, I was asking about what are your thoughts on the recent tenure controversies involving Nicole Hannah-Jones and Cornell West at Harvard? I mean, because I think that all of us as academics, we're thinking about these issues right now, race and tenure, and how we should respond at our own institutions. So I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Thank you for that great question. And it's good to see you again, Chad. The moment I learned about their respective situations, I mean, I've been, not in touch with, but I've been aware of them off and on for quite a while, especially with, Dr. With Cornell West, and reading their letters and their responses say those issues, their respective issues, their content, my mind is all over the place. But anyway, I think that their situations speak volumes to how we function, as universities, especially PWIs. And as a Black woman, as a Black scholar, I'm somebody who has worked hard. I publish, on a fairly regular basis, and I know that I've had to jump through the hoops to get, where I am. And something that we as a collective in the African American community have to, we have these conversations at home. These are private conversations. We have these in our different spaces that revolve around it's a reality that we have to work twice as hard, or even 3 times as hard. And I believe that when it comes to Nicole and Cornell West, I can't remember her last name, that's why I just said Nicole, is that they have gone above and beyond, what the standard is. And so maybe they're not, publishing, I mean, they're publishing, but in different ways. They're making a significant impact in society, and there should be some recognition, of that. And when I heard that she turned down the offer to, as we all know, she was denied tenure, and then with the pushback caused them I think it was the Board of Trustees to come back, and they voted to give her tenure. I just thought, wow, who would want tenure after that? I mean, because now you're going to be in an environment where people are very likely going to be hostile to you, and that might not even be in the school there. And I believe the school was, I forget the name of the school within the university, but they were supportive. I know that they issued a statement of support, but no one wants to be in a situation like that. And I think it was part of one of her most recent response, and she said that go where you are appreciated and celebrated, and that resonated with me because that's exactly what I said before I came to LSU. I mean, I did a lot of work at LSU, at UGA, and I don't regret my time being there. But I wanted to be in a place where I would have access to resources to help other people do their scholarship, and to help me do my scholarship, and just to, have the space to really, do the work that I know that I have been quote unquote called to do. So when I heard her say that, that really spoke to me, because I was like, yes, you need to be where you are appreciated and valued. And I commend her for that. And I want everyone to, take a moment and really think about where they are. Are you appreciated and are you valued? And if we look at Cornell West, I mean, he's written many books. I don't know how many he's written, but he's written a whole lot more than me. I've got tenure, but why don't we give, why is he not given tenure? I mean, he's, you know, a world-renowned speaker. He has all this expertise, and I think it's a huge problem, and it's troubling, you know, to see that if someone works as hard as the two of them have, and they don't get tenure, I mean, it's crazy. And I think they both were. Well, now she's, I think, an endowed chair as well, and you know, Cornell West, he should have been one. But what's even more insulting about those respective situations is that they were each going to be offered a contract for a set number of years. And so for Nicole, I think it was set for 5 years before they said that she would have tenure. And then for Cornell West, it was 10 years. And so it's almost like they're still going to be scrutinized for those, you know, respective timelines that they were going to be, you know, working at those institutions for the next milestone. And so, you know, I think that, you know, for his mental health, he probably had to leave, and he needs to be in a place and space where he's appreciated. And I'm glad that she has, you know, moved on and is going to Howard, where she can really thrive even more, you know, even more than what she is now. So those situations resonated with me, and I am supportive of them 100%.
Thank you for that. I have to agree with everything you said, by the way, Tina. So I'll go to Y next, please.
This question is really not for Tina alone, since I'm seeing that some of you are in a privileged position. I'm just going to throw this question out. Now, connection is clearly important. Inclusiveness is important as well. Listening is important. But my question is, how do we reach the people that truly need to have the dialogue with us, right? My university have set up multiple diversity workshops, but every time when I attend, I see the same faces over and over again. And somehow people who truly needed to have that dialogue are not there. So I'm really frustrated about this particular phenomenon. So I wonder whether there are any strategies that any one of you have utilized to reach out to those who are, quote unquote, the unreachable, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, Tina, before you jump in, I think it'd be great to have Tina's response, but also I know we have a few other folks in here who are current administrators or former administrators. So I might put, after Tina, I might ask Carolyn if she has anything to add. I might ask Caroline if she has anything to add. I might ask Wallet if he's okay, if he has anything that he would like to say, or others to jump in on this, please. So, because that's a great question. Yeah.
I'll make mine short and sweet. What I think should happen is we need to have some socials, some interactions that allow us to get to know each other in a very casual way, so that people don't feel like, goodness, okay, here's another diversity you know, session that I have to go to. And like you said, we're going to see the same faces, but let's try and reach people in another way so that they can feel like they're connected as you know, as a community. And then they may feel like other efforts to promote diversity are going to be a little bit more genuine. So I think we need to have a balance of the two. Okay, that's it for me.
Caroline, did you wish to go next?
Or is there any follow-up on this question before I know?
Okay,
Caroline,
all right.
Follow up on this question, because I think this is
All
really
right.
key. Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that comment, because that is something that is really troubling for me. And I think one of the things that we could do very easily that would help to lower the temperature, so to speak, would be for us, all of us, to practice the demonizing others. Using the language of demonization would be a good place for us to start. And I think some individuals feel as if they are excluded by virtue of the discourse, the conversation that we put in the environment. I mean, how does one reach an individual after you've said to the individual, you are no good, you're the devil, you're a demon? I mean, how do we reach that person? So I think the first thing that we should do is to cleanse our vocabularies of the language of demonization. And I focus on empathy. That's the second thing that I promote. I promote empathy. learning what it is like to live by someone else's light. And as much as we possibly can, try to see the world from the other person's perspective. And I think we would see some radical changes in the way in which we do our civic business.
Any other thoughts on this particular question from other folks who have tried to, to facilitate these kinds of, I can just say from a New Zealand context, we've done a lot when it comes to trying to promote cultural diversity, particularly as we deal with the Te Tiriti, the Treaty of Waitangi. And so our university was treaty led or Te Tiriti led. Now it's Te Tiriti aspiring because we haven't reached the leading part yet. And so one of the things we do to try to get people to such training, such cultural diversity workshops, such issues wherever we deal with culture or diversity is kai, or food and drink is one of the things where we try to make it as informal as possible. At least it works more here in this context. It isn't always successful, but it's one of the things we do try to do is to bring people together in a more casual setting in that way to try to break that ice. Then you do get more people who generally don't come to these things because whenever you have an event, the same people always come. So trying to get different people, but kai is the traditional Maori word for like food and socializing. And it's very common here to do that. Of course, it really does havoc on your catering budget, but it's really nice to have. Anyone else on that one?
A couple thoughts, but they're sort of all over the place. Thanks for asking the question. And thanks, Tina, for your presentation and your responses. It's great to see everyone here. Great to be in this space with y'all. And thank you, Stephen, for the invite. There's sort of scattered thoughts. One is from a theoretical perspective, thinking of sort of stages of change model, and think of diffusion of innovation and the rate of change and who's gonna adopt innovations at what rate is useful, right? So different people are not at the stage to make change. Other people are. Target folks where they're at, and you're gonna probably get eventual change over time. But there's gonna be some folks who are laggards. Number one. Number two. Sometimes I get too wrapped up in the 10% who are simply not interested in it and feeling like I have to change their minds before we can move forward as a group. And I've learned that that's actually unproductive and really harmful because I'm spending all my energy on the tiny percent that probably are not going to change and that are slowing everything down. So I think the better way to do it is to just change the train. The train will move and they can choose at that point whether they're going to jump on the train or stay off it. As opposed to waiting until they're ready before we make any change. So that's kind of, one thought. The other thought is, well, first of all, there are many communities in the world who have experienced this kind of question for a very, very long time, beyond the efforts that we're doing in the United States right now. Israel, Palestine, you can go, that's my most direct experience as a Palestinian. And also, and I think turning to those communities for guidance on this, I think is really important. But also I would say, it's too often certain communities who are asked to take on empathy. And this is to Carolyn's, perspective, because absolutely, I think, I hear that, and it's really important. And the demonization is a problem. At the same time, and I co-taught a Palestine-Israel class with a Zionist for a very long time. Ultimately, we stopped it because it was too much emotional labor for both of us. And at some point, it came to a point where I need to defend my right to exist, and I'm no longer willing to do that. When you're at a table with folks who have far greater power than you, and you have to consistently defend your mere right to exist, that's not a conversation I'm interested in doing. And I think too many of these diversity inclusivity conversations are exactly that, right? They're folks trying to convince others that they deserve the same treatment as humans as them. And I know a lot of folks who are just not willing to do that anymore. And I think that's, the challenge in some ways, because to really make change in the folks who most need change, there does need to be some version of I don't know what needs to be, but you know, I can understand the folks who are not willing to have conversations with those folks because they're tired, and they have emotional labor to spend elsewhere. So that's the challenge that I see in some ways, is how do you, you know, where's the middle point that you can sort of not feel like you have to give up your right to exist, to have this conversation, to move the sort of the yardstick for other folks.
Thank you. Yeah, very much so. I mean, I really think there's so much there. I think that I really, if I may, I really appreciate particularly the issue of looking back or looking to other groups who are going through and have gone through, you know, these issues, because unfortunately they've been around for so long. We just haven't learned. Some of us may have learned better, but society hasn't solved them. I don't know if they ever will, unfortunately. But I also like the idea of that 10%. You're exactly right. And it's not just in this issue, but in most issues, there's always that vocal 10%. And you learn to sometimes just try to move away if you can, but it's hard. So I guess going to Caroline Hatcher, also for those of you who are new, one of our other former presidents of WCA from Australia.
Thank you. And Waleed, thank you. I was very touched by your comments, and reading the newspaper all the time, being way down under here where we're away from the rest of the world, except Stephen. we observe with great sadness the way those situations are going with Palestine and Israel. Heartbreaking to me. So I appreciate that the right to exist is a fair and reasonable way to proceed. I was actually going to ask a question in relation to this, but I just want to just make a comment about, in a response to, I think it was Wise, your question about what do we do to try to move these things forward. And I must just, one small experience that I tried, because the 10% is impossible, I totally agree. So one small experience that I tried was to set up a buddy system for an undergraduate program with international students. International students, certainly in Australia, have a lot of difficulty integrating, and it's not to do with them, it's to do with how the people who host them receive them. And so one of my very most successful mentoring programs was this buddy system, where we asked undergraduates to become a buddy with an international student. And my thinking there conceptually was that this was a way really to do what Tina was saying, to have more sort of social interaction occur and connection occur. And in doing so, to learn a lot for both people about another culture. And I was really thrilled. At the time, I was chair of the equity committee, and so I had a lot of opportunity to, fund that. And it really helped to get, I think I had about 60 buddies and 60 international students. And we did that over a number of years. And, I felt it was really a small way to contribute to that conversation that needs to occur between people in a non-threatening way. And of course, there's always that issue of power. So, the local student having more power than the other, but over time and with various supports, I think quite a lot of that changed. And so then international students were being asked into local group interactions more broadly. And I think so it was a sort of a snowballing. So I just think that's one of those social ways that Tina, that you mentioned, Tina, about how we might make small steps in that way. But I did want to also then ask the question, Tina, of you. I'm just wondering if you're getting much institutional, in our case, it's a media intervention in what constitutes an appropriate curriculum. Because in Australia, we have a media that's and a government, to be quite honest, that's very anti-intellectual. And on the basis of that, they're very worried that we're teaching in schools and in universities that we're teaching critical race theory. This is a problem, you know. So we're actually getting interventions in not daring to, you know, so a new curriculum came out for the high school students only, I don't know, a month ago. And there's already talk that it shouldn't be in there, that critical race theory shouldn't be in there. So just to share a little bit of an international perspective on the issue. So I wonder, you know, if you're having anything like that in your experience.
Yes, here in the States, we are certainly having that. I believe, was it Texas? There have been a couple of states, or at least one, I can't remember if it was Texas or Florida. I don't want to misspeak, but at least one state has made it illegal to teach it. And I don't know if that's in only K through 12 or college. And if that happened in Georgia and I were still there, then I would not be able to do a lot of the research that I'm doing. And what has really frustrated me is that people don't even know what critical race theory is about. They're making all these assumptions, and what it's doing is, and I know that we all probably already know, you know, that it is a theory to explain systems and how they operate in terms of oppression and how they are affecting people. And so and it's something that we're thinking about here at Manship, not necessarily discouraging conversations about it, but recognizing that these are, it's possible that it's on the horizon. I think recently there was a legislator who was trying to address it and make it, you know, officially not outlawed, but have a policy or a House bill that would say that we cannot talk about or address diversity issues in our curriculum on the college level, wanting to do research to find out what are each one of the individual disciplines on campus doing. I mean, so there are people that are out there trying to do the work to undo the kind of work that I do, as far as, you know, opening students' ways of, you know, thinking and experiencing the world. And to me, it's counterintuitive. I mean, if they really understood what it was about, then they would in theory be open to this theory, but they're not. So we know that there's a fear.
Mm.
that is driving
Yes.
you know, these protests.
Mm.
Yeah, so, but I'm still going to be doing my critical race theory work because it's important.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So I'm also keeping a watch on time. Ming had a question in the chat. And so I don't know if you can see that, Tina, or if you just want to ask the question, Ming. And then we have Barbara, and then I'll do a quick little sum up. But we have about 6 minutes left, I would say.
Tina, it's Ming here from Massey University. And I have a question about cultural inclusivity or cultural diversity. These are key themes in your presentation. Now, in terms of cultural inclusivity or diversity, I have this question. The United States is ganging up with some countries to isolate China, to stop China's rise. And how would you persuade the United States government to use an exclusive cultural approach instead of an isolationist approach? Thank you.
I don't know if you'll thank me once you hear my response, because my response is, that's a dissertation question. And I think that's almost not in my wheelhouse at all. It's an important question. And I personally don't have like a political background, I think, that would most inform a response to this question. I do want to open it up quickly to the floor, but I think the simplest way that I can answer that is, I just don't understand why we all can't get along and appreciate each other. Wars don't make any sense to me. Any kind of prejudice, any kind of systemic oppression, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. I know that's not helpful, but I don't think I have an answer. I would rather not answer than give you an answer that would misspeak to the point of your question. So is anybody else out there who might have an answer that I can copy off of your paper?
I like what you said, really. I think you're right. That is a dissertation topic. Any of my PhD students in here, don't change your thesis, but that is a dissertation topic. But I think it is one of those things. But you talked about, if I may, you talked about, the connection between, race, media, and social justice, equality. I think there you see those connections between political decisions, as we know, are connected with media representations, how innovation is, what we heard about earlier, diffusion of innovation. All these things are connected. So that's why it is such a difficult question to answer, because how the media represents, like we saw this with, the Wuhan virus, Kung flu virus, all these kinds of things, media representations that perpetuated prejudice, so many connected parts. It would take a whole panel or two just to even answer a simple question, not alone the thesis. So
that's true, because we've not even begun to touch the issue of the role of the media in promoting these negative narratives.
no. So that's something that we should talk about, maybe a PhD student doing. So, but thank you for that. I'll now go to Barbara, who is also former president of WCA and now our chief financial officer. So she makes sure I don't spend too much money.
Well, I do the best I can on that. I want to talk about a particular situation that is going on in the community in which I live, and that is Madison, Wisconsin. About a year ago, the Madison Metropolitan School District sent out a survey to parents of elementary and high school students, trying to find out ways to get better feedback and better information from their various constituencies on how to deal with issues such as the disparity in retention rates and graduation rates and school expulsions and that sort of thing. And the survey was conducted and a lot of response came back. And one of the major responses that came back from parents of students of color in the area said, we'd like to have some focus groups just of people within our own ethnic or racial groups, so that when we go to the larger communities, we can speak with a louder voice. Okay? So the school district started to set up some of these, only to be threatened with a lawsuit. Discrimination law, that it's against the law to actually set up groups with that kind of, not the kind of a focus, but just the idea of where you're having groups, specified groups in open meetings in which other groups are not invited to attend. So I'm just curious, as somebody who studies the issues of race and ethnicity, and what would be the next advice that you would give to the Madison Metropolitan School District as they're trying to deal with this issue?
Okay, I think I heard a lot of what you were saying. There was a delay, I think, in connectivity issues, but I think maybe the next step would be for some of the faculty to think about how they can integrate this into their research, so that they can get approval through IRB to have same race focus groups, so that they can legitimately collect this information, not to be used in a negative way, but at least that would legitimize the opportunity to have same race groups to speak about these different issues. Because we all know, those of us who do qualitative work, that when you are conducting focus groups and you're dealing with issues of race or sexism or whatever, people are going to want to, most likely be in a group where there are shared identities, and depending on the topic, since it would be dealing with race, they might more than likely will feel more comfortable talking amongst people who look like them. Otherwise, they might censor what they have to say. And so I think that might be an approach that could be used, in that you're avoiding the legal aspects of it by having, well, I'm not an expert on that part of it, so I'm just looking at it from a researcher's standpoint, in that you could have a faculty member write a proposal to do this kind of research, and they could collect it. If they're able to have the resources to even reward people for participating, that would be great. But if they can not only do it with community members of color, do focus groups with whites as well, and then they could have some comparative data they wouldn't necessarily have to have comparative data, but at least that would give everyone an opportunity to, speak in an environment where it's safe and ultimately can lead to, not publications might not be the goal or the ideal, but there might be resources that are produced for the community to understand how they can better, address these issues and to have these important conversations that lead to results and change. I don't know if that helped or not, Barb.
Well,
Partially.
Okay.
okay. Well, let me just do a quick little summation. I know we're a minute over time, but first of all, I have to thank Tina again. As I said earlier, not only do I professionally, respect her, but I personally admire her. So as a human being, as a person, as a friend. So everybody, like the Zoom claps, thank you so much for lovely, thought-provoking. For me, just a couple of things I'll say is I really enjoy and I appreciate the way you say race is what I do. I thought that was something that just stuck with me. I thought that was really important. It was great that you talked about how we can make a difference. So I'm happy when we share the opening session on our website and on Facebook later on, other people can see really recommendations on how to really incorporate, how to understand, how to really speak and even acknowledge race a little bit better. And so I really appreciate that, which is kind of theory to action. And I kind of really appreciated that aspect of the presentation quite a lot. Listen, listen, and listen again. Thank you. That's something that is really important. And our conversation afterwards really brought up a lot of key issues that, issues of, what is race? What is critical race? What is media? How do all these things impact media, politics, immigration, economics, people's right to live? And as we see, this is so impactful and important for us that I was really happy that we could have this conversation. So thank you again, Tina, for being our opening keynote for this. Just to let everybody know, we have in about 13 minutes, we have 2 panels coming up. Just to let everyone know, the first one is Leadership in the Academy and Beyond. It's a roundtable discussion with the former presidents and myself of WCA. And this is all in the program. So if you go to the website, you'll see the program there. The Zoom link is there. And we actually have 3 panels. And we have Communicating about Work and Work-Life Balance during COVID-19. And we have another one on informative seeking and caring giving in health settings as well. So there are 3 things going on next, and all those panels are open for everybody. So, but thank you so much, Tina. I'll let you have the last word.
Well, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It means a lot to me. I thank everyone, for coming. This just kind of gives me the fuel that I need to continue doing what I do. I guess I'm such a nerd like that, where I'm like, yeah, I'm so excited, but I'm also a little bit sleepy. But thank you, for having me come and speak. And it was a wonderful opportunity, and I hope we all have a great conference.
Thank you so much. So I really appreciate also the me search. I love it, me search. So thank you, everybody. We look forward to seeing you at the other panels we have today. We have 3 or 4 tomorrow. So as I said, 11 minutes now, the next panel starts. So we will be closing this Zoom in just a moment. And then your chairs will be able to let you into the next ones. And so there won't be any problems in that way. So if anyone has any issues as chairs, just reach out to Cheng or myself or our IT folks in the email. And look forward to seeing everybody. Stop in. There will be some of this posted online. For all these will be posted for folks to watch later. So we have a lot of folks who've already emailed me saying they couldn't be here because of the time zone. So they will be watching it later. So I'm glad we can have these things. So thank you so much again. So all the best. Stay safe wherever you are. And we'll see a few of you in about 10 minutes. Bye. Kia ora.